I don't have anything special to say. I don't have any announcements to say. Terry, if you're ready to go, we're going to jump right into our second session here of the morning.
All right, Ephesians Chapter 5 again, if you would. Ephesians Chapter 5. Husbands, your responsibility is to lead. Anybody have any questions? We're done. All right, no. You don't get off that easy. It was during preschool that a 4-year-old by the name of Susie heard the story of Snow White for the very first time in her life. And she came home and she was bubbling with excitement. She could hardly wait to get home and to retell that fascinating tale to her mom. So after school, she got home. She's relaying how Prince Charming, arrives on his beautiful white horse, and he gives Snow White the kiss that brings her back to life. And little Susie then asks her mom, and you know what happened then? And her mom said, yeah, I do. They lived happily ever after. And little Susie says, no, Mom, they got married. From the mouths of babes. Little Susie declared a profound truth without ever realizing it, and that is that getting married and living happily ever after are not necessarily synonymous. And because of that, there is this massive phenomenon that's taking part in our culture and other cultures as well, and that is that most people simply aren't getting married. Oh, so they're remaining single. No. They're living together. Well, I've got some numbers that we'll talk about tomorrow morning. But a lot of it is hinged on the fact that many in our culture do not see marriage and happiness as being synonymous. And so as a result of that, they're simply not getting married. Tremper Longman in his writing said that marriage is not merely a convenience to overcome loneliness or an expedient arrangement to propagate the race. First and foremost, marriage is a mirror of the divine human relationship. Every marriage is meant to represent God, his perfect relationship with himself, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as well as his relationship with his people. We can reveal God by the way we love our spouses. And his point is what we talked about earlier in the ladies' session, and that is that really what Paul is dealing with in this text, and he gets to it down in verse 32, is that he's talking about marriage, but that's like 1B. 1A is the relationship that Christ has with his church. So let's continue to build on our foundation, the framework, and we're going to look at the role given to the husband. We've looked at what was given to the wife. The Bible teaches that there is a huge difference between possessing authority and being an authoritarian. And gentlemen, we need to understand that authority is ordained and authorized by God. Authoritarianism is not. And in many cases where a wife is reacting negatively to her husband's leadership, it's not so much the element of authority that she's reacting to, but often it's his misuse of that authority that she's reacting to. So let's read Paul's instructions to husbands, verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought to also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own body loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, what we looked at last night from Genesis 2. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his own wife even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. When we read the instruction of that Paul gives to husbands, you'll notice that headship is not stated in there anywhere. You have to read the wife's instructions to see the element of headship. Now, that doesn't mean that a husband's not the leader, that he's not the head. What it means is that that's not Paul's point of emphasis. Instead, what does he say husbands are supposed to do? Love. In fact, he says that 3 times. When the Bible says something once, we pay attention. When it says something 3 times, there is a point that is specifically being made. Now, when the world thinks of headship, when the world thinks of leadership, what does it think in terms of? You're the leader. What do you get to do? We see it in sports. You know, man, that guy's a leader because he's doing what? He's taking control. He's in somebody's face. He's screaming and yelling at him. That's the world's idea of headship. You get to be the boss. You get to call the shots. What you say she has to do, that's not even close to biblical headship and leadership. Did you have your hand up?
In response to your question, my first thought was he's inspiring the team to do what they need.
Inspiring the team to do what they need to do. That's biblical headship, isn't it? Not in your face screaming. Now you can inspire somebody. Well, I guess you can compel somebody when you're doing that. I'm not sure inspire is the great word. The directive to love is one that is stressed more than any other thing in Scripture. It is the key ingredient to unity and harmony in any human relationship. And that's especially true in marriage. And so, just as submission is not exclusive to wives, it's the lifestyle of the Christian. The same thing's true, isn't it, in regard to love? That, you know, love is not exclusive to husbands. We are all instructed to love one another. Now, why tell a husband 3 times to do what you would think is the most natural thing for a husband to do? Because we're stupid. All right, I like that. That just cuts right to the chase. It just answers the question boldly. And it's probably a little bit more than that to it, right? Okay. One of them is it provides balance to the headship. It ensures that authority doesn't go to his head. That Paul doesn't say in instruction to the husbands, you're the leader. If he goes back and he looks at wives, and obviously when this letter came to the church at Ephesus, it was read in public. So husbands would have read their wife's mail in this situation. They would understand their role of headship, but that's not where Paul places emphasis. His emphasis is, okay, yeah, you're the head. But this idea of love balances that component.
Yeah, I would go further than just balance. I think that it completely redefines
it.
Because it's like in the Roman world, you know, there was the patris whatever that word is, where like the husband had the legal right of like whatever he said.
In Rome, yeah.
When Paul says the husband is the head of the wife, he was just stating a well-observed fact. Like we hear it, we kind of buck at it. Like he said it, and everybody's like, yeah, that makes like
right.
Our culture understands. But like the reason he spends so much time with husbands here is he's like, now let me tell you what that should mean.
All right, great. Great. Yeah, what he's saying is, for those of you back over in the corner, it's just that, you know, for the husband to be head, that was pretty much the rule of the entire ancient world. And so that's nothing new, but he's saying, here's what that looks like in a Christian. I'm summarizing you, by the way, because somebody said it's hard to hear in different places, and so I'm going to try and repeat what you say. And so if I get it wrong, just ignore me. I'm not kidding. Be sure and clarify that. Yes?
Does Paul use the word love 3 times to the men because of the culture and the way it was viewed?
I think that's a large extent of it. Okay, so there's a second reason. That, you know, the first is that you have authority in the relationship, but love balances it with affection and care to the relationship. The second reason, I think, has to do with the word itself. society, even our own society, how does it define love? What's love about? All right, sexual. What else?
Your feelings.
Feelings, okay? Feelings. Infatuation, okay? It's portrayed in Hollywood all the time, right? That love is this feeling that just overwhelms you, and you just can't help it. It's warm and it's fuzzy. Even many of the pagan religions taught that husbands were to love their wives. But they used a word that sort of watered that concept down. The word that Paul uses here, anybody want to take a stab at it? It's agape. Okay? It's agape. It is a word that, from what we're able to see, really wasn't used much in the Greek-speaking world until the advent of Christianity. It was there, but it really wasn't used much. The kind of love that is called upon from Christian husbands here is typified, exemplified in the example of Jesus sacrificing himself for the church. It's not a love that's void of emotion and feeling, but it is a love that is far more of will and of choice. It is the kind of love that seeks to do whatever is necessary to accomplishing the highest good of the object that is being loved. It's a love that does what needs to be done, regardless of the cost, regardless of the merits of that which is loved. Whatever is needed is what it looks to give. And it continues to love, even if that love is not received, not requited, even when it's resented and unappreciated. The world's view of love today is superficial at best. It's the kind of love that when I was in junior high and in high school, I fell in and out of love every 2 or 3 weeks. I don't think my wife's in here yet, so I can get away with saying that. We didn't meet till after I was out of school, by the way. So that's not the kind of love Paul's talking about here. That's what the world thinks of when it thinks of love. Now, just like the wife is to be submissive regardless of the behavior of the husband is to love regardless of the behavior of the wife. So both of them are actually called upon to, and here she comes. So by the way, don't tell her what I said just a minute ago, okay? Yeah, I can trust all of you, I'm sure. We are to perform our different functions on the team in spite of the negative feelings that we may be having toward one another at any given moment in time. The kind of love that Paul's talking about here is not a love that just happens to you. It is the kind of love that you make happen. It is unselfish. It is purposeful. It is self-sacrificing. It willingly does what is the very best for the one being loved. Now, look over, you may want to hold your finger there in Ephesians 5, but look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We're familiar with this chapter. This is that great chapter of love. And I just want us to read what love is. And husbands, I want you to think about this in terms of, okay, is this a description of who I am in regard to my relationship with my wife? Verse 4. Love is patient. All right, sometimes I'm out right there. We've read one, and sometimes there's times I'm out. Love is patient. Love is kind. Is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked. It does not take into account a wrong suffered. It does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Bears all things. Believes all things. Hopes all things. Endures all things. Love never fails. A lot of husbands, we think that that's how we're loving our wives, and we're not. And the real tragedy is that we're clueless when it comes to actually seeing and recognizing the enormity of our failure. And the reason that I can be so bold in my assertion that husbands usually aren't loving their wives the way that Paul instructs is because of the parallel that Paul. Raise your hand if you're a husband who's loving your wife as Christ loved the church. That's a high calling, isn't it? We're striving for that. And I've heard husbands say, yeah. And I want to look at him and say, you're a liar. You could say, I'm trying to do that. There's none of us doing that, right? We're honest with ourselves. Because that kind of love is so high. And yet, Paul makes us responsible for doing that. So there is an element here of which it's attainable. The kind of love that is drawn from the example of Jesus giving himself on the cross. Jesus loved the church not because of what the church could do for him, but for what he could do for it. Now, from a feeling standpoint, when it comes to the cross, what's Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2 say about Jesus and the cross? Anybody know that passage? What?
I said endured.
Endured? You got one of the words right here. Despising the shame. Despising the shame. So from a feeling standpoint, how enthused was Jesus about the cross? It would have been something he would, if he had a choice, and I'm using that term accommodatively because I understand he did have a choice. From a feeling standpoint, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But he does it out of love. He endures the pain of the cross not because it's in his best interest. It's not because you and I were so worthy or so deserving of it. He did it because that's what was in our best interest. There's a little book by Wayne Mack. It's actually a workbook, kind of a workbook sort of thing. It's got a lot of questions and stuff in it. I was referred to it by a counselor. It's Wayne Mack is the author. Strengthening Your Marriage is the title of the book. And here's what he says. He says, a leader is first and foremost a servant. His concern is not for himself. His concern is not to give orders, to boss other people around, to have his own way. His concern is to meet the needs of others. Indeed, if the best interests of others are not on his heart, if he is not willing to sacrifice himself, his personal needs, wants, desires, aspirations, time, and money, if the needs of others are not more important than his own, he is not qualified to lead. That's strong. That's strong. And that's biblical. What's that? It's Philippians 2.
I was thinking about that earlier when you were talking about submission. It's such a mutual thing.
Have this attitude that is in Jesus? Yeah. Humility, we're going to talk about humility here in just a moment. How can he be that strong about saying that? Because of the parallel that Paul draws here. Jesus, tell me what Jesus did for himself. Solely for himself. I want to do this and this is what I'm going to do. Nothing. He loved to a degree that boggles our mind and that hopefully softens our heart. That's the power of the gospel right there. It's not a list of rules. It's about understanding the depth of Christ's love for us and us responding in a way to that demonstration of love. God gives that command 3 times in a single paragraph. But what is involved in loving as Christ loved? First of all, there is a comprehension of real needs. When Jesus came, he didn't come to fulfill needs we don't have or irrelevant needs that we may have. Jesus' love was one of total unselfishness. And husbands, we are to love our wives in exactly that same way. If we're loving our wives as Christ loved the church, we are never going to use headship as a device for manipulation, to exercise control. We're never going to use it to get what we want. That's not how Jesus loved. What we learn here is that everything that you and I do as husbands and leaders, our first thought should be, what does my wife need? What are her concerns? That's first. Now, let me ask you guys. I know there's may be a few exceptions, there's not many. You think a wife would be willing to submit to a man like that? Who, when he makes a decision, she may not even agree with the decision, but she understands, look, he's making this decision in what he believes to be the best interest of me. He's not making this because it's the best interest of him. He's making it because it's what's in the best interest of me. So you've got a husband who wants a big screen TV, to watch the games on, and the dishwasher's broken. What's a husband doing who loves Christ as the church going to do? And buy the TV. Is that what yeah, whatever, Brent. All right, come on. Yeah. Just don't go to sleep at night, brother. You find a pillow over your head. Well, he's going to help her wash dishes until he gets her a new dishwasher. Okay? Look, I don't need that big screen TV right now. You need this more than I do. That's a demonstration of love. Loving as Christ loved the church starts with a comprehension of what do our wives really need from us, and then look to fulfill those needs. Because Jesus didn't come to try and fulfill or satisfy needs that we didn't have. He came and fulfilled our greatest need. And so, do you know what your wife needs? There was a survey. It's a number of years old. But in the survey, they said if your husband would agree to give you any one thing, what would you ask for? Here's the top 10. More time, more understanding. She has stress too, by the way. Stronger leadership, especially with the kids. Affection in public. Holding her hand. Seeing her across the room. Giving her a wink. She's ignoring me back there, by the way, so she didn't see that. Be more forgiving. Exercise grace and not grudges. Really listen to what I have to say. I think we're going to talk about this more tomorrow, but I don't know whether you realize this or not, but men and women are different. There's a reason. Women are made to connect. They use conversation to build relationships. Men use communication to answer questions. And so that's why women circle the airport and men use the single word answer, or at the very most, the Reader's Digest condensed version of things. Care about my feelings, even when they're not the same as his. Pay her more compliments. Notice her more. Accept me as I am. You're not trying to change her, coerce her, manipulate her into being something different. And I found this last one interesting. Need me more. Why was woman made to begin with? What did we look at last night? And because he was alone. She's made to help her, but it's motivated by the fact that he is alone. He needs her. Guys, we've come a long way, and not in a good way, from Genesis chapter 2. When you look at that list, is there anything on that list, guys, that you would consider to be unrealistic or impossible? The reality is that everything on that list, it is a fairly small thing, isn't it? I mean, there's not some huge, she's not saying, hey, you need to make $1 million a year. That might be impossible. There's nothing on this list, guys, that we can't do. We've wandered a long way from what the days of Adam, when we understood what it was like to genuinely be alone. Now, look over at John chapter 13. In John chapter 13, I want us to see the example of Jesus, and our sister here brought up Philippians chapter 2, and that's actually a great passage as well, in regard to the humility that Jesus exercised. And we see that here in John chapter 13. And so somebody tell me what's going on here in the beginning of the chapter. Verses 1 through 17, what's happening? Already washed his feet. What's the context? Ryan? All right, after the Passover, before the crucifixion, before the cross. This is on the night that he is going to be betrayed by Judas, and he is going to be arrested and tried, and so by the next day, Jesus is going to be hanging on a cross. They're gathered in the upper room for the Passover feast and to celebrate that. And in the middle of that feast, what does Jesus do here? Okay? He takes off his robe. He takes on the wardrobe of a servant. He girds himself with a towel, and he goes around and he washes all of the disciples' feet. Who didn't do that? Everybody else in the room, right? Everybody else in the room. I have to believe that when Jesus does this, you could hear a pin drop in that upper room. As Jesus slowly made his way around the table, washing the filthy feet of all of these individuals. It is an incredible act of service. But here's what I want us to notice. Look at verse 12. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet, for I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you." What I want you to notice in particular is verse 13. Jesus makes the point here. I'm teacher and Lord before I washed your feet. What am I when I get done? I'm still teacher and Lord. His incredible act of service doesn't diminish in any way his authority or his leadership. He's the same Lord when he gets done. It only enhanced his lordship to them. Jesus demonstrates here in a powerful way that the true symbol of leadership from a biblical perspective is not a throne and it's not a club. It's a basin and a towel. We often think that it's the wise responsibility to wait on husbands. If we were to apply this, what would we walk away with? Come on, guys, you can say it. Maybe we should be waiting on her more, right? He's serving. It's an incredible act of humility. Let's add one more to this. And hang on here. Let's see. Okay, so let me get caught up here. Acts of sacrifice. John Stott, in his writing, said that the church's head is the church's bridegroom. He does not crush the church. Rather, he sacrificed himself to serve her in order that she might become everything he longs for her to be, namely herself in the fullness of her glory. Just so, a husband should never use his headship to crush or stifle his wife or frustrate her from being herself. His love for her will lead him to an exactly opposite path. He will give himself for her in order that she may develop her full potential under God and so become more completely herself. Now, when it comes to genuine sacrifice, let's just be honest with ourselves. Whether we're talking about husbands and wives, whether we're talking about guys or gals, we deal with sacrifice at a fairly superficial level, don't we? That if we were honest with ourselves, a lot of what we do is in reality for us. And yet, when we read this passage and a multitude of others, what we see is that Jesus gave everything on behalf of his bride. And somewhere in the course of our marriages, guys, we tend to lose our focus on all those little personal things that we did when we were dating. The common courtesies and considerations that we did almost without thinking about it as when we were dating, they sort of go away when you get the ring on her finger. But while neglecting those kinds of things comes easily to us, they're very important to her, because our wives not only continue to need them, but they thrive on what it communicates. And that is, it's a demonstration of love. It's making her feel special. She needs to know that she's loved, that she's appreciated. And you don't just do that with words. You do it with actions. Sacrificial actions. And so, guys, what are you willing to give up? I've heard guys say, you know what, well, would you die for your wife? Absolutely, I'd die for my wife. Will you turn off the football game because she's got something really important she wants to talk to you about? Well, I can't do that. You say you'll die for her, but you won't turn off a football game? Now, ladies, you can do that if you want to, just to sort of goad him, I've got something really important. Can you turn it off? It's a test. See if he's going to do it or not, I guess. Go shopping with her. And I'm not talking about Home Depot or the sporting goods store, Cabela's, unless that's where she likes to go. My wife's got a rule. I think, ladies, you're going to find out about the rule when we go shopping together. But there's times, and I don't do it all the time, but there's times where I go shopping with her, clothes shopping, and it's just about us spending time together. And not only that, but I get to also have a hand in her picking things out. I really like that on you. As opposed to her bringing it home, that's all right. But if you're there, no, that one's all right, but that one, I really like that one. Sending her a card. If you know your wife, you'll know whether she appreciates that. Now, you think that, the card companies, it's corporate larceny. And, if I was to even remotely suggest that you mail it to her, spend whatever it is, $5 these days, I don't know what it is. But to put it in the mail so she receives it at home or at work may seem like a waste to you. It's not to her. Flowers, that you're wasting your money, right? I mean, you're walking out of the store and they're just dying. You can see it as you're walking out. But a wife appreciates that. You're not squandering the money from her standpoint because it's speaking volumes to her. What did you sacrifice? You stopped at work. You wrote a card. You had something that you were wanting to do on a Saturday afternoon, and instead, we went clothes shopping with her. And guys, let me just tell you a little bit of a secret here as well. Okay, ladies, I don't want you to listen to this part. Okay, so just tune me out. Just hum to yourself or something. So don't listen. Guys, here's the deal: is that I don't. What are your grocery stores around here? You guys have at home? It's Kroger. It's okay. Don't go to Walmart. They got horrible flowers. If you go to like Kroger or some of the grocery stores that have floral departments, there's times where in the summertime I can get my wife a bundle of gladiolas for $3.99. I stop in, I bring her gladiolas for $3.99, and she's thrilled because it's not about the price. It's about the thought. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. And here's the bonus to that, is if you make a habit of that every now and then through the course of the year, when it comes to Valentine's Day, you don't have this overwhelming sense of guilt, and then you go drop $180 on roses one day out of the year. It kind of takes that pressure off when you get to Valentine's Day. All right, ladies, you can tune back in now. I'm glad you didn't listen to any of that. Yes?
I think what you're saying gets to a bigger point about compensation. Like sometimes we're not doing what we need to be doing on a daily basis. We believe we can compensate.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Some grand gesture.
That's right. Yeah.
Even worse is going against your first point of there, which is comprehending real needs. Sometimes we think
Yeah.
What is the thing that I'm not doing? Of course, it's for a larger conversation we can have.
Yeah. Oh, you're not going to say she said nothing? You're doing it all?
She said nothing on that list.
Oh, okay. All right. There we go.
No, but we compensate. If our wife wants more time, but we say, yeah, but I gave you flowers last week.
Right. Yeah.
She wants
Yep.
more interaction, more emotional depth, but you say, yeah, but I took you to a movie on Friday.
Right. Or I bought you a dishwasher.
Yeah, if we're not doing what she actually needs, then they're compensating.
Right. Right. Yeah. You can't. Yeah. What Ryan's point is, you can't compensate. You can't buy flowers to cover up some other flaw or assumption or not meeting her needs in other areas. Did I summarize that okay? All right. And by the way, your wife, she may not be a flower person. She may be a chocolate person. Know what your wife, what she appreciates. What says to her, you're special to me. And she doesn't want to have to ask, because if she has to ask, it destroys all of the meaning of a spontaneous gesture on your part. And one of the things that God has built into women is that they have an incredibly strong responding nature. And what that means is that our wives will appreciate even the most feeble efforts if they're what? Sincere or genuine. If they're sincere or genuine. If you're trying to buy her off, because, I messed up, bringing her flat, well, you may need to do that. But that'll just get you in the door, okay? The flowers, if you messed up and you bring flowers, all that is to get you in the door to have a conversation to actually fix it, okay? The flowers aren't going to do that. When we begin to think of love in terms of that it's all emotional, that it's all feelings, we will only express love for her when we feel like it. The problem is that life often gets in the way. It's easy for us, especially as guys, to get wrapped up in things at work, a multitude of other things beside her. And so loving our wives has to be a conscious decision, because a feel like it kind of love is not the kind of love that Jesus had for his church, and it's not the kind of love Paul calls on husbands to have for their wives. Jesus put our needs, our concerns, our feelings before his. Gentlemen, our wives are supposed to be the most important human being in this world. She is your most critical, permanent investment. She is your lifelong partner. And a willingness to sacrifice for her like Jesus did for the church helps our marriage to reach the divine potential. Next. Guys, it means that you're the initiator of reconciliation. And how I get here on this is that Jesus gave. What did we do? When Jesus gave, what did we do prior to Jesus giving? It's the only thing we did. Sin. So who was the initiator? Us or him? He was. Jesus initiated it, huh? While we were still hopeless, he died for us. He's the initiator. Now, understand, when I say this, I'm not saying you have to acknowledge that you're always the one who's wrong. That probably is true, but you don't have to. I'm not saying that, okay? What I'm saying is that Jesus didn't wait for us to say that we were sorry. He didn't wait for us to admit that it was our fault. He didn't demand that we come to him first. He initiated. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do. That it doesn't operate on the basis of feelings. It operates on what is in the best interest of the individual who is loved. What is the most beneficial to the relationship? And if you are in an extended period of where, you're giving each other the dreaded silent treatment, it's the husband. Take the lead. Sweetheart, we need to sit down and we need to fix this. That's hard. Welcome to Headship, guys. This is what it's about. It's not about getting to control and manipulate and call all the shots, and you say jump, she's got to ask how high. That's not it at all. First and foremost, in any realm of disagreement, we'll talk about this tomorrow, the marriage has to win. If you walk away from an argument and one or the other of you has won, and the marriage is lost, you've lost. The marriage has to win. It is about the relationship coming out the victor. Now, leadership obviously is a tremendous responsibility, but I think what we would be more accurate to describe it as, it is an enormous responsibility. That the kind of relationship that God is wanting from us here is not going to come by accident, some stroke of luck. It's not going to happen automatically. It's going to take time and effort and energy and probably and most likely a lot of pain and some heartache. It is a process that has to be cultivated. And if you were to point out to me somebody that you think has a great marriage, I'll bet a paycheck that all you're seeing is the end result. You have no clue about the hard work that went into getting it that way. And Bev and I, we've had a lot of hardships. There were times, and I'll probably mention this tomorrow, but there were times when Bev and I, we went to marriage counseling. Well, wait, preachers can't do that. Well, yeah, they do. They're smart. We just got to a place where we're just having trouble working through some things. And what I found interesting was that the counselor didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. He just helped me see some things clearly, and Bev to see some things clearly. That's leadership. Now, you think that you've gotten to a point where, okay, I'm loving her as Christ loved the church. Let's just say, for the sake of illustration, that's the case. Paul issues a second challenge. And he says, I'm in John here. Let me get back to Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 5. He says, beginning in verse 28, so husbands ought to love their own wives as their own body. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it. This is the important part of this, just as Christ also does the church. Now, when we come to verse 28, it seems to us that this is a bit anticlimactic, doesn't it? I mean, Paul appears to have gone from these lofty heights of Christ's love dying on a cross, and he's descended now to this rather low standard of self-love. The parallel continues. The parallel here continues to be Christ's love, Christ's care that he manifested for his own body. Who's his own body? It's us. It's us. I mean, Paul is, in using this parallel, Paul's still talking about Jesus and the church. He took care of his body. He nourished it and cherished it. What I think Paul is doing is providing us an analogy that is in more tangible terms. He paints a picture for us in terms of our own life experience. We may know something about the depth of Christ's love that would go to the cross, but we are very well acquainted, are we not, with everyday experiences about how we go about loving and providing for ourselves. Men and women have always been concerned about taking care of themselves, and perhaps at no time in modern history have we been more pampered and indulged in terms of ourselves than our own day. There's almost something instinctive about the manner that we treat ourselves. We look out for our own welfare. And so what Paul is talking about here is what he's pointing to is this tangible standard of conduct. That the same effort that Jesus put forth to meet the needs of his body, husbands naturally take care of their own, but who's a part of him? Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, they shall become one flesh. She is in reality an extension of him, an extension of his body. And so he takes care of himself, but he's to take care of that extension of his body, his wife, what is to her benefit, to her welfare. By the way, the word verse ought there in verse 28 is a word in the Greek that meant to owe, to be under bond. What it stresses is, husbands, we have a moral obligation. We are indebted to love our wives in this way. How can Paul say that? Because our lives are an extension of who we are. We are to function as one flesh, as a unit. We are to have the same care for her as we do ourselves. And so husbands, we are charged with nourishing and cherishing, with protecting and providing, with sacrificing for her to the same extent, to the same level as we would do for ourselves. And husbands will stand accountable for a lack of that. We'll stand accountable for the decisions we make, good or bad. Genesis chapter 3, you remember the first sin? Adam and Eve are hiding out in the garden. God comes to the garden. Who's he go looking for? Who's he look for? Adam. Why? Why, Brent? Welcome to leadership. Well, she was first one. No, man, it's you. You're the leader. He goes and he finds Adam. By reason of his headship, Adam is ultimately the one who's accountable for the choices. Husbands were accountable for decisions. Wives are accountable for how they submit to those decisions. And husbands were not only going to be held accountable for the decisions, but will be held accountable for not loving our wives to this extent. There's a reason that mountain climbers are tied together, and it's not just to keep the sane ones from going home. It's because if you're going to get to the top, you have to work and you have to function as a team. And the same thing holds true in terms of a marriage. You can't, if you're working independently of one another, understand that you are not going to succeed. You have to be interdependent. Biblical headship is a situation of a husband giving the very best of all he has to those who have been placed under his care and authority, in particular his wife. That a good leader is making it easy for his wife to coexist with him, because his leadership is always balanced with this kind of love. And so husbands, what does it mean here to love our wives as of our own body? Let me just get here to, I'm just going to go through these here quickly. Do you know your wife? Do you know what she needs? What is her greatest concern right now? What is her greatest hurt? What is her greatest need? Communicate openly and clearly. You got to let her in. She's got to know what's going on the inside. Set the example. Don't expect something out of her that you won't do yourself. Leaders are out in front. Make sound and timely decisions. Don't abdicate them. Don't, just pass the buck down to where by default she has to do it. Make them, and make them based on what's in the best interest of her. How can I say that? Because that's what Paul says. Don't just be responsible, be accountable. You screw up, what do you say? I'm sorry, babe, I messed that one up. I'm sorry, I will strive to do better in the future. It's one thing to be wrong. It's another thing to admit that you're wrong. Gentlemen, our wives are an invaluable gift. They have eyes that see things that we don't. They process information through a unique perspective that we don't have. Their hearts are sensitive to things that we're not. God has given our wives traits and strengths that are designed to offset our own weaknesses. It's not God's design that we simply endure our marriages. He wants us to thoroughly enjoy them. But to do that, you have to understand what your role is. And you have to be looking to fulfill it to the very best of your ability. Now understand, if you want to wallow in mediocrity, God gives you the liberty to do that. But don't blame him. Don't blame the Lord for how your marriage is. Because what he wants for you, I can say with 100% certainty, what he wants for you is for your marriage to be the most fulfilling human relationship on the planet. That's what he wants. That's what he'll help us to achieve. But you got to want to do it. There was an old elder a long time ago told folks, he said, the only thing I can't fix is a broken want to. I thought that, sometimes old guys can just sum it up in a few words and really hit the nail on the head. The only thing you can't fix is a broken want to. You can settle, but understand that's not what God wants for you. And so I hope you'll have some important conversations from this and that, begin to work. And it's not easy. I assure you it's not. It's going to be a lot of hard work. But the payoff's worth it. The payoff's worth it. And, Bev and I, we've been married 43 years. We're still working on things. But I tell you what, we've come a long way from where we were. The stuff we used to argue about. And you look back at it and you just shake your head. It's just, stupid. That was just stupid. All right, so any questions, comments before we adjourn for lunch?
Ephesians 5, I think it's C.S. Lewis that says that if God gives the man the crown, in Ephesians 5, it's a crown of thorns.
If God gives, C.S. Lewis, he said, if God gives a man a crown, it is a crown of thorns. I mean, that's good. C.S. Lewis, he said some good stuff. It's either him or Abraham Lincoln, one of those two. That always said good stuff. Anybody else? You're all hungry, aren't you? All right, so, Ryan, you want to close this out? All right, 1:30, back here. All right, see you then. For the split session, so ladies, you'll go upstairs to the classroom, I guess, and then fellas will stay. And guys, if we'll tighten it up down here, that would be fantastic.